Let me just paint a little history to begin with. This has nothing to do with what happened this year, directly. But back in 2004, Mark Warner was governor. The Republicans controlled both houses of the General Assembly. Mark Warner pushed through historic tax reform. It involved some tax increases to balance the budget and to invest $1 billion, new money in education. Historic. You know, for that, Governing Magazine said he was the Governor of the Year. John Chichester was named the Legislator of the Year, not just in Virginia, but in the country. And Mark Warner, to this day, would not raise his voice against those 8 Republican senators and 17 Republican delegates across the aisle to help make that happen. Because he understood and he understands the importance and necessity in the world we live in today to work with one another across party lines. You know, it's great being Democrats. David and I are great Democrats, and David is the best delegate right now. The best delegate. And he's also the minority leader, the Democratic leader. I don't think minority. But Mark Warner understood the importance of working across party lines. He would never speak against those people. Last year, the Republicans, led by the governor, spent over $4 million to retake the Senate. They didn't take the Senate. But the people they targeted, Roscoe Reynolds, who they got, Chuck Colgan that they didn't, Philip Puckett that they didn't, Ed Houghton that they got, were the very 4 senators that reached across the aisle more than anybody else to help Bob McDonnell accomplish his agenda. Different sorts of animals. What the foundation, I want to lay the wonderful speech David's going to get. But different sorts of animals is what we're dealing with. We're in a different environment. Mark Warner understood that government is not just about cowboys and Indians, Democrats and Republicans. It's about getting things done. And that's why we all believe in what we're doing. The people in charge now, it's all a game. It's all politics. It's all partisanship. It's not Virginia. We have a lot of work to do. And with that, David's going to tell you everything that happened and didn't happen.
Well, thank you, Steve. Why don't you just wind both of these guys up? Well, you know, 2 people to follow. It's very difficult. Of course, you know, Creigh, for those of you who don't know, is my senator. What a great honor. He's represented my area for quite a long time. And at some point, maybe we'll touch some inside scoop about you. But for now, it's all about the General Assembly. And as you well know, Virginia has received quite a few headlines in the last few months. And it's not been about the best state to do business. It's not been about the best place to raise a child. It's been about ultrasound and the socially conservative overreach agenda that the Republicans have pursued in this General Assembly session. When Governor McDonnell gave his State of the Commonwealth address in early January, he warned his colleagues not to overreach. But overreach is what we got in a whole wide variety of places. But you know, and we can talk a little bit about ultrasound, and we can talk about the fact that when the bill first came before the House, we figured out that what it meant was that women would have to have a pretty invasive procedure to figure out gestational age, and it involves a probe. And we told the Republicans, this is what this thing does. And they said, oh no it doesn't. No, it doesn't do that. And so they just passed it. There were 30 co-patrons on that bill. Not just votes for that bill, there were like 30 Republicans who co-patroned that bill. A co-patron means that you really have read the bill and you really support the bill very strongly. So we told them this, and they said no. Meanwhile, there's a Senate bill. Senate Democrats are telling them this. They're saying, nah, it doesn't really do that, and they pass that bill. So then the Senate bill comes over to us. And we look at it again and say, yeah, it's the same bill, does the same thing. What are you guys doing? You really don't want to do this, do you? Oh yeah, we do. They pass it again. And then all of a sudden, Governor McDonnell, who is running for vice president, and seeing what's going on nationally and seeing people get arrested on the steps, he's saying, oh, man, God, I gotta do something about this. So what do we have now? We have got a bill now that requires a medically unnecessary procedure that requires doctors to listen to the great ability of us to be doctors and prescribe for them how they should treat their patients. I require them to have this procedure. It totally unmasked the ultrasound bill for what it was, and that's an effort to intimidate women and nothing else. But the thing is, you know, you can talk about this bill and how bad it is policy-wise, but it's bigger than that. It's indicative of how they are dealing with things down there. It wouldn't have to be ultrasound. There are a whole host of other bills that they just don't read. They just don't know what's in them. They have just drunk the Kool-Aid. There is no deliberation. It used to be our colleagues in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, would deliberate. I mean, Creigh can tell you that the Senate sees itself, has viewed itself historically as a deliberative body, and a lot of the partisanship would go away once they got into the committee room. But the right took control with this last election, and a lot of the deliberation has gone out the window in the Senate. So that's why everything is so much more dangerous, because we're now passing things that people haven't read. And if you're a rational person and you read some of these things, you might not really vote for them. But they're so hooked in to their partisanship that they can't see the forest from the trees. Now, our role as Democrats in the House is to really go after the Republicans and really try to push to the extent we can our agenda. So we started very early. Governor McDonnell's budget, when it came out at the end of December and was introduced in early January, was terrible. It had draconian cuts in the social safety net to affect those people most vulnerable. It shortchanged education substantially. It did some things in Northern Virginia for education that would have removed millions and millions of dollars from those localities. We know what it did to localities in general. So we decided we would start hitting them, hitting them, and hitting them. And we kept doing that, beating that drum from January until the House got a budget. The other thing it did, of course, was the infamous diversion of money that would go to education, public safety, mental health, etc., and sending it for transportation. We weren't going to let that happen. So we kept hitting him and hitting him and hitting him. And as a result of our efforts, the House budget that passed was a lot better than McDonnell's budget. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better. Now it got over to the Senate, and the Senate said, quite justifiably, it ain't good enough. We got to do something else. They rejected it. Not once, not twice, I don't know, 14 times? 3 times. And because of what the Senate did, there were a lot more good things that were put into that budget. And even though at the end, I'll be really curious to see your reaction to how this all played out at the end, even though at the end, a budget came forward that wasn't the Senate, the Democrats, and the Senate's budget, this budget was a huge victory for people like us who pressed so hard for that additional money to be put in education. It was not total victory, but it was a huge victory, and no one would have ever predicted that we would have gotten that far knowing the budget we had in January. These things are a process. One final note. Now in my exalted status as minority leader, I get a chance to go and sit with the governor on a more regular basis. And he would bring me into his office and he would talk to me about this, this, and this, and we want to work together and work together and work together. Well, you know, that ended very quickly. You know, one night I was driving down the road with the Democratic caucus chair. We had just killed one of Governor McDonnell's bills. You know, you don't believe this, but actually the minority can kill a bill. If you know what you're doing procedurally, you can do some things. Right, Frank? So we pulled a rabbit out of our hat and we killed that bill. Well, the cell phone rings. And I look at it and I said, unknown number. Cell phone said, David, this is the governor. What is it all about this willing to cooperate? I worked really hard on this bill and you did this, this, and this. And my colleagues say, well, I hear all this yelling, who's on the other side? And then he hears me yelling back. And when I'm done, he says to me, David, who are you talking to? I said, I'm talking to the governor, Mark. You're talking to the governor like that? I said, yeah. So the governor likes to call us up and yell at us. So that's part of the story.
The governor doesn't call me. Don't worry about it.